welcome to all of our listeners. Thank you for coming back. We hope you're enjoying this season so far, because we certainly are. As always, if you haven't started following us on Spotify, YouTube or Amazon yet, please quickly just click off and click the follow button so that we can reach as many people as possible. So this week we are talking about careers, and we know that obviously in the teaching hemisphere there is a lot of struggle at the moment in terms of teacher retention, but there's also students coming through with their teaching qualifications and their NQTs that are then struggling to get the job roles that they would like. So today we are really lucky to have Miss Parrish join us from Petite Primary, who is a teacher, a content creator and a career success mentor. She has helped over 300 students secure their first teaching jobs through workbooks, proofreading their personal statements and through coaching calls. So without further ado, welcome Miss Parrish.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get started.
Thank you for being here. So first of all, our regular listeners will know that we always do a what went well and an EBI from our weeks. So first of all, what is your what went well from this week?
So my what went well this week is actually a lesson that I planned. I'm in year 6, and obviously as we're nearing SATs, there's lots of revision and we're trying to cram loads of content in. So I think it's been hard to make lessons engaging, but what I did is I did a SPAG lesson, and I did one of those classic carousels, and you know what, they all kind of moaned and they were like, oh no, this is boring, I hate spelling, I hate punctuation, I hate grammar. And I was like, do you know what, absolutely, I get it, me too, but I've tried to make it as fun as I can, so you guys are going to have to work with me. And actually, do you know what, they loved it. They loved how fast paced it was. They loved that actually I did less teaching than normal, and they could just move around and have a variety of activities. So to see year 6s engaged in SPAG lessons, you know, was thrilling. I was really happy with how that went, and it was definitely worth it.
Oh, amazing. That is so lovely to hear. It's always nice, isn't it, when you know it's going to be a lesson that the children aren't necessarily engaged in. Just to remind our listeners, SPAG, it does stand for spelling, punctuation and grammar, doesn't it?
Yes, correct.
Perfect. So it's really hard, isn't it, when you know you've got one of those lessons coming up. So I do a lot of DIRT lessons, so dedicated improvement and reflection time. And you know they're not the best, they're not the most engaging lessons, and children don't generally like them. But when you make it in a way that engages them and excites them, it's always an absolute win. So well done you. So I suppose next, what is your even better if for this week?
So my even better if is regarding a staff meeting that we had after school. They are kind of revamping the art curriculum, and obviously in primary school you have to teach every subject, and there are always those subjects that we're not as confident in, and art is one of them for me. I dread it. I hate modelling. I can't model, and I'm not afraid to admit that. So, you know, I was kind of reflecting on how I can improve it, because in year 6 they have much higher expectations than, you know, year 1 where I've previously taught, for example. And so I've kind of decided over Easter I'm going to have to just try and practice some things, because we have an art trip coming up, and I just thought I don't want to ridicule myself and, you know, reveal it as a weakness, even though it's okay to say I'm not confident in this, etc. But yeah, even better if practice art, because otherwise I am just going to it's not going to go well. So I need to practice that, and I guess it kind of gave me that boost to just reflect and just think, okay, stop using it as an excuse. Nobody else is going to teach it for you. Just crack on and just try your best. So yeah, that's my even better if, and it's kind of a long-term one as well. So yeah.
Amazing. Well done you. I think it's so important, isn't it, as teachers, and we sometimes forget that we have to reflect on our own practice and our subject knowledge. Obviously having correct subject knowledge is in our teaching standards, so it has to be there. And I really take my hat off to primary school teachers, because I cannot imagine having to teach every subject in the curriculum. And naturally, I mean, for Miss Dimon and I, we're scientists at heart, so then having to go in and teach art, I think we would be in the same boat as you, if I'm honest. So yeah, fantastic that you're willing to take that time out and improve your subject knowledge within art and in your holidays as well, but make sure you don't overdo it, please.
I won't.
So now we're going to move on to a day in the life of. So we like to always just to get to know our guests and let our listeners get introduced to a little bit more. but understand what each day looks like for you. So if you could explain what a day in the life of Miss Paris looks like, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so I try and get to school kind of around 7:45, 7:50. Prepare everything. So I've got, the sheets ready for the lessons. I've got PowerPoints, up and ready. Those kind of little prep. We have briefings 3 times a week. So depending on the day, I will also do that. Then I have some year sixes that come in early for some reading intervention. And then the rest of them come in. We'll do, well, we're kind of trying to squeeze so many things in at the moment. It's quite hectic. So I think we've got around 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, 7 lessons a day that we try to fit in around break and lunch, assembly, those kind of things. And 2 times a week we have after school meetings, which will take us to around 4:30. And then I will always try and prepare for the next day, because you never know what could happen. There could be a queue at the printer, there could be, traffic. So I always try and make sure I'm ready for the next day, just to make my morning kind of, what's the word? Kind of more smooth, and to make sure I don't give myself additional stress for no reason. Then I'll go home, have dinner, and that's when I normally work on petite primary things. So if I've got any personal statements outgoing for, editing, or coaching calls, interview prep, then that's when I'll do all of those things. And if I've got the motivation, I will post some content as well. So they're a little bit sporadic sometimes, but that's just life, isn't it? You can't do everything. You need to think about your work-life balance as well. So I try and juggle everything, but I think it's those little moments of doing things in the moment that will, your future self will thank you for, whether it's tomorrow or in a week's time, or like with that art, I'm trying to prepare so that when I have that art lesson next term, I won't freak out. So that's kind of how I like to do my day, kind of preparing for the next day, or preparing for next week, etc. I kind of make it roll over. And yeah, I structure my day like that, really.
Really good, thank you. So it's really nice to hear how you are making sure you're looking after your well-being, considering how busy you are. And it sounds like you've got quite a nice routine to make sure that you still manage to fit everything in, but without stressing yourself out too much. And you obviously really enjoy your petite primary stuff, so having that in the evening is a nice touch for you. So it's work, but actually it's enjoyable work and stuff you really enjoy doing. So that's lovely. A few things that I'd quite like to pick up on. So you said you have 3 briefings a week and then 2 meetings after school. That seems like quite a lot. I'm just intrigued sort of what's covered in your briefings and what the meetings after school are.
Yeah, so the briefings are from, I think, 8:15 to 8:35. It is just basically every single member of the school getting together and going through any plans for the day, any staff out, any things that people need to be aware of, any safeguarding. So we have it on a Monday because very often there might have been safeguarding concerns that were raised during the weekend. And, if it's a family with multiple siblings in different classes, it's easy just for everyone to know. And, that way we can, if they're in the corridor or they're upset, we all have that context as to why. We also go through any playtime or lunchtime adjustments. What else do we go through? And then I think we also do like a little positive section. So anything positive from last week or the day before, just to try and like boost morale and highlight those good things, whether it's about pupil, staff, some attainment, all of that kind of thing. And then it's, staff have the opportunity to raise anything if they want to. So if they'd like maybe the pastoral team or inclusion team to maybe pop in or keep an eye out on this child, then that's a good time to raise it as well. It all kind of, they've got like a set checklist that they kind of go through, and if there's nothing relevant, then we won't say it. But yeah, it used to be every single day. So to think about a workload, they cut 2 sessions down, which has been really helpful, because otherwise you'd have to make sure your whole day was ready by 8:15, whereas now, you can have until basically the last second to prepare anything before the children come in. And then we have meetings after school. We've got staff meeting, which is based on any CPD that SLT deem appropriate, or whether there are any curriculum changes, anything like that. And then we have phase meeting, which is where I guess it's almost like your kind of head of departments, our head of key stage, so key stage 1, key stage 2, will have a meeting with all of us and say, okay, this is coming up, we need to do this. This is the message from SLT. Can we go through, these types of books and, implement this marking strategy? Or, we'll do book looks, book scrutinies, lesson scrutinies, all of those kind of things. That's done in that allocated time.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that. It's really nice to hear talking about safeguarding, because I think it's really easy for anyone outside of teaching to forget how important safeguarding is. And actually it is a daily occurrence. And it's really interesting to hear the differences between meetings in a primary school compared to meetings in a secondary school, because they have roughly the same agenda, but it seems like there are just minor changes between what it looks like in primary and what it looks like in secondary. So that will be really interesting for our secondary school listeners. So thank you. And then obviously CPD after school is standard, isn't it? And it's all the general, whatever, like you say, whatever SLT deem appropriate at that time, and what essentially leads in with their whole school CPD plan. And then when you say phase meetings, do you mean like the year group phase?
So kind of the whole key stage. So key stage 1 will be grouped together, which is, we put reception in there. So reception year 1 and year 2 will be together, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 will be together as well. I don't know if all schools do that phase meeting. I don't know if it can be generalized to everyone, because I've worked in 2 schools that didn't do that. But yeah, I think it's a good way to have smaller groups of people, and you still get the messages from SLT, but it allows you to kind of work within your year group. Because you can imagine if, a reception teacher is in the same meeting as a year 6 teacher, and you're looking at each other's books, like it doesn't compare. There's too much of a gap in terms of ability naturally. So it allows you to be kind of more niche, I suppose, and kind of more focused and hone in on those Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2 specific skills.
It's so interesting to hear how much you achieve in one day. There's so much breadth from, content creator to running options with pupils. There's so much breadth in your day, and there's so many skills you need there. So I'm just really curious, if you could tell us about your journey from university to now, and how those experiences prepared you for this very diverse life that you lead at the moment.
Yeah, of course. So I started teacher training in July 2019. And so that obviously meant that I qualified in July 2020. It's interesting because obviously you mentioned, diverse skills and how these experiences led to that point. But actually it was more experiences that shouldn't have occurred that kind of helped me get to this point. So obviously we know that COVID happened, and I'm not sure if it was different within secondary or if it was area dependent. I can't remember now. But for me, my whole cohort was not allowed to go to school anymore as of March 2020. So instead of having March, April, May, June, July, 5 months worth of extra experience, we lost all of that. We didn't have direct contact with pupils, well, at least my school wasn't. We didn't have, online teaching for the children, because I was a trainee, so that all kind of fell on my mentor. And the result of this was that obviously I lacked a lot more experience. When you're a trainee and you're applying for an ECT role, naturally, you're at the bottom of the scale in terms of how much experience you have. And then I lost out on 5 months of experience as well. So I had to learn the hard way through a lot of rejection in terms of job hunting. I got so many rejections saying, oh, we've given it to somebody with more experience, etc., etc. And I completely understood. It was a fair point. But at the end of the day, I still wanted to start my career. And that's how all of these skills that led to Petite Primary kind of formed, because I had time to start YouTube videos. I had time to kind of answer any questions that people had. I had a lot of time to do job applications and do trial and error of personal statements and experience with virtual interviews, and then over time, then we got back into schools to do in-person interviews, and the skills that you needed were just completely different. And so it took me a while to get my first role. I then got a role in September 2020 as a PPA teacher. So that meant I taught French to year 6 all the way to reception, or the other way around, I should have done. So 650 pupils every single week. And this was huge for me because remember, I'd lost 5 months of experience. And now suddenly I would teach year 1, walk along the corridor, go into a year 6 classroom, and you just changed your teaching style like that. I suppose it's the same in secondary. If you go from, teaching year 7 and then suddenly you have an A-level class of, 16, 17, 18, I'm not sure of ages anymore, year olds, it's that same kind of skill. You just have to adapt your style, the level, the academic ability of your content. And so that was actually huge. I know it didn't count towards my ECT. I often don't count it as one of my roles because I was quite ashamed of it at the time, but it did help me hugely in terms of gaining those skills. And then I went on to a long-term supply in year 1. And after that, I just had 3 maternity positions in a row that they kept extending. And I'm still currently at the same school after 3 years and now teaching year 6. So yeah, it was those kind of experiences I wasn't meant to have. COVID was never meant to happen, that actually kind of brought me to where I am now. And I don't know if it would have happened if it weren't for that, the opportunity to reflect, to sit down, to make content, to talk to people, to experience all of that rejection that obviously most people would consider as, kind of the, I don't know what how you would say it, but, the thing that almost destroys their spirit. For me, it really helped me. And I was doing all of these kind of things for free. And in August 2021, after doing loads of market research, loads of helping people, already getting positive feedback and testimonials, I launched my services more formally. And since then, they've continued to grow. I've introduced workbooks and handbooks and one-to-one coaching calls, all of these things as a result of my experiences. So I think had I had the perfect training and then gone on to a school, stayed there for the rest of my career, retired at 65, I would never have had the opportunities to help people as I do now. So, I really like talking about my journey because I think it's one that really shaped me to who I am today. So I'm very, very grateful for all of it.
I think there's so much value in what you're doing. I had a very similar experience to you. So I think I was a year behind. So I started training September 2020. So right at the mix of COVID. So when I joined the school in September, end of September, I did PGCE route, so through Warwick University. I had very little time in the classroom. My cohort, some of them actually only got 6 weeks in the whole year. From September 2020 to obviously the June when you pass your PGCE. So just to share my experience with you, I applied 11 jobs and I teach science. So typically in the UK, there's a lot of science jobs available because there's not many of us in the country. But with my lack of experience during my training years, no one wanted to hire me, which I totally understand why. I had never really been in a classroom. It's a lot of risk for them to put into me. So I applied for 11 jobs before I finally got an interview. I was looking for your website this morning, and I was reflecting on why I think my personal experience, why I wasn't really getting the interviews. And there was a section on your website that was titled Personal Statement. I am terrible at writing. I have dyslexia, which is obviously why I've gone into this Senko route. So I was just wondering if you could explain to us kind of the services that you offer, because reflecting on my own experience, that personal statement bit would have been amazing for me because, like I said, writing is not my forte at all.
So yeah, can I first of all just say thank you for sharing that with me, because I know that it's really difficult, and when you put a number on how many jobs you've applied for, it really kind of, some people it might boost them and be like, I'm so happy with where I am now, and some people it kind of, people react to that differently. So I really, thank you for sharing that with me. And in terms of personal statements, you are absolutely not the only one. who has found it or, currently finds it tricky, because it's such a difficult skill to do. All our lives we're told, don't talk about yourself, don't be cocky, you need to be modest. And then, psychological research shows that as women, particularly women, we often contribute. That's also the wrong word. What word am I looking for? I'm going to say blame. We blame our success on external factors. So let's say in an exam, if we do really well, we'll say the exam was too easy, or, I revised really, really hard. If the exam went poorly, then we won't say, the exam was really hard. We'll say, we didn't do enough. We're not clever enough. And so whether we do well or whether we do poorly, we always blame ourselves for things. It's very common in women. And I think, when you're thinking back to your personal statement, it's really difficult to sell yourself. Ultimately, that's what you're doing. It's 2 pages of A4 where you're meant to say to schools, this is why you should hire me. This is why I'm experienced. And, for the people that were in COVID, for example, and we know we've had less experience than we should have, and then we're against candidates that may have 2, 3, 4, a decade worth of experience. It's so hard to stand out because you're like full of self-doubt, you're full of imposter syndrome, and there you are trying to just write a piece that is like, hey, hire me. And it's just not a natural skill. And so I've kind of launched quite a few services with personal statements because I realized that people need help at different times. Some people might need help getting started. They're faced with that blank page. They think, oh my goodness, I don't know what to write. I don't know where to start. And then you kind of maybe go to a colleague or you go on a Facebook group and they say, oh, use the personal specification. Yeah, I can see that. It's right there. The points are there. Nothing's going on to the page though. Nothing's coming out of me. And so I kind of developed a workbook for that because I thought coaching calls, they can be tricky for this because it's so personal. And on a coaching call, it's, live one-to-one. They may not think of points straight away and they don't necessarily know what I'm going to say. So if I give them a handbook, or I call it a workbook, if I give them a workbook that takes them through the entire journey, they can do it at their own pace. They can think of their work-life balance. They're not allocated to an hour after school on a call. They can do step at a time. It takes them through the whole process from planning your content all the way to refining it. And that way you have that whole independence, but you've got expert guidance on the same time. I also have a Peel handbook, which is basically the formula to structuring your paragraphs apart from introduction and conclusion. So a really common error that I see is I will, read people's personal statements and it goes something like this. This is a paragraph. I always make sure to adapt my teaching. I communicate with parents as to their child's progress. Building relationships is really important for behavior management and also communicating with parents. And the whole paragraph will be like that. They just do point after point after point. They've taken the personal specification. They've been inspired by the teacher standards. They've meshed it together into a big ball of really nothing of value. And it sounds so mean to say that, but if you just hear somebody saying, oh, I'm really good at this, and they give no evidence, they don't talk about the impact of that, that means nothing. I have no medical background whatsoever. But if I say, I really care about patients, I have experience working in a ward, and no examples, then technically it's the same thing, isn't it? And I think people need guidance with that. They need to kind of be alerted of these pieces of text or paragraph or statements that just add nothing of value. And so often they go, but there's so much to write, and I've done my 2 pages of A4 and I've still got so much to say. And I'm like, actually, I don't want to be rude, but you haven't said anything. I don't know anything about you. I don't know any lesson you've done. I don't know any key stage you've worked in. I don't know anything you've planned or any of your behavior management strategies. You've just said loads of statements that people want to hear, but there's no proof to it. And that's why this was one of my first offers actually, but I help people edit their personal statement because lots of people, they don't have that blank page syndrome. They've got so much to write. They've got so much passion. They go for it. And actually they submit application after application after application and they get nothing. They don't hear back. They're ghosted by schools and they're just like, help, because I don't get it. And every single time I reply to them with a full, set of comments along the side. I do in-text editing. I make them think about, if they do have peel, how can we up-level it? Think about if you're teaching English in secondary school, or even if you're in year 6, something like that. When a child gives you a piece of text, there might be nothing wrong with it, but you can always up level it. You can always make it stand out more. Think about your use of verbs. Think about your examples. Think about the impact you are, talking about. Are you just saying, oh, they focus really well as a result of this lesson? No, go further than that, expand on it. And so I go through all of that in my editing, because I think no matter where you are in that journey, whether you are getting shortlisted, maybe a third of the time, or whether you're never being shortlisted, there is always things you can improve on. And, I spent, even with having edited, hundreds of statements, when I did my personal statement to reapply at my school, I did spend a whole weekend on it, even though I knew all of the little tricks, all of the little insights, because it's so important to get it right. That's the first impression the school has of you. And so many people take that for granted. And so personal statements, I'm very passionate about. And then I also help with interviews. So very often you'll get interview tasks. It will be things like design a 25-minute or a 30-minute or an hour topic for, year 3 or year 5. It can be on a specific lesson. It can be just a subject. It can be whatever you want to teach. And people get really floored by that. You've just spent, a whole year maybe training, or maybe in an ECT year, doing 1 hour or 45-minute lessons, and suddenly you need to teach them a whole lesson, show off your teaching capability in 25 minutes. And people just think, I don't know how to do that. So I hop on a call with them. I design the whole, lesson with them. They feel confident afterwards. I make sure to help their workload, because they often go, oh, I can do this worksheet, and I need a challenge, I need a PowerPoint. I'm like, or you could just not do any of that, and we can think of verbal challenges. We can think of a practical activity with equipment that they have at the school. We can limit your use of PowerPoint by thinking about your live modeling, etc. And then I fill out a lesson plan that they can take with them. They can print it off, provide it to their head teacher, observers, whoever is watching them. And that's really successful as well, because people spend hours overthinking, and instead they can have just an hour with me and it's all planned. They can focus on preparing interview questions, which I also help with. Basically I teach primary is my passion project, because I feel like if you are willing to seek help, if you're open to getting advice and feedback, then, potentially I can help you along the whole journey. So if you come out of training and you think, oh my goodness, now I need to start looking for jobs, don't threat. Personal statement is there. There's an assistance for you. When you're done, let's edit it together. When you've got an interview, let's plan the lesson together. When you are, done with the lesson and you want to start preparing for interview questions, I'm there as well. And I just feel so privileged that I've been in so many people's journeys, like you said in the introduction, over 300, I've kind of lost count now. I just feel so lucky and privileged. And then I get to speak on places like, here, about what I do. And it's just amazing. The whole journey is just incredible.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Your passion completely shines through when you're talking about it. And as you were going through all the services and things that you offer, it was making me reflect so much on my experience. It was quite recent when you were talking about the personal statement. I'm just curious, because I studied science at university, my method of what I was taught how to write was mainly through lab reports. And appreciate this also. So when you write a lab report, you barely use commas, to be honest. It's just fact after fact after fact, because that's how scientists are taught to write. So my whole experience at university that's how I was taught to write, which makes writing a personal statement for someone like me and anyone that kind of works in that science and maths field so difficult. I'll never be able to go to the places that I go, I'm really not even sure what appeal is, if I'm honest. That's how simplified our writing is in science, because it can't have much fluffy language around it, because that's not the focus of our field. So I'm really curious, what did you study at university?
I studied psychology. So,
Lovely. Where did you study?
I started actually in Maastricht in the Netherlands, and then I transferred to my hometown of Bournemouth. And yeah, it was actually funny because, just on a tangent, the two universities are so different in terms of like content and style of learning, etc. But again, you make a very valid point in terms of you were taught to do lab reports in this way, and then suddenly you have to write a statement, because it's not a natural skill. And then you have career changes, let's say, I don't know, accounting, and they've been doing numbers for 2 decades, and suddenly they need to write a 2-page essay, and they haven't done anything of the sort until, well, since UCAS, when they had to apply for uni in the first place. And it's just like there's no guidance. Every single time you Google how to write personal statement, what to include, it's always the same thing. They always say use the personal specification, use the teacher standards, write about your experience. And I'm like, yeah, but you can read that 6 times and still have no idea where to start. So it's really validating to know that actually it is a problem that people do experience. And even the most educated of people that have done degrees and, scientists, I consider like some of the cleverest people, if they find personal statements tricky, that's their only way to show their teaching ability until they get to an interview stage. And I already think that's not a very fair kind of playing field, is it? Because if you study English, or you're, going to secondary school as an English teacher, you're already going to have so much more ability to write in that, flowy, beautiful way with commas, like you said. So I think, providing services like I do, it gives everyone a level playing field. And my services aren't specific to primary. I know I've obviously got primary in my name, but even if I have no idea what you're talking about in secondary, and I don't know the lessons, I don't understand the examples you're giving, the writing techniques and let's say the Peel formula are exactly the same. They can apply for anything, and I think that's really important to know, that although I have petite primary in my name, I don't limit or restrict who I help in terms of abilities, or whether they're primary, secondary. I've even helped people in or I don't know what they're called actually, teachers that teach in colleges. Is that further education? Or is that college
so normally
teaching?
College, we normally call them lecturers when they're in college.
Okay.
And then it becomes, it's not classed as further education, I don't think, until it's post-18. So post-18 is further education, but if they work in a college, they're not known as a teacher, they're known as a lecturer.
Okay. And then it's really confusing as well, because for me, college is like, it can be anything kind of over 18 and those kind of like additional courses. But then I think a lot of people call college for A-levels, whereas my A-levels were done in my secondary school. It's all very confusing. I don't know if there's like a rule to it. But yeah, so I've helped lecturers as well. And so I think, everyone can be supported, I think, because most of the problems are very common across the whole playing field, really.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear what is common mistake that you see with teachers applying for jobs, and then your number one piece of advice you'd give the teachers applying.
Okay, so the most common mistake that I see is, I kind of mentioned it already, but people not thinking about the purpose of their statement. We all know, okay, the purpose is that I get an interview, but actually, what is the purpose of you writing X sentence? What is the purpose of you mentioning Y example? People need to think about, if I write this, what do I want them to take away? And there's often that lack of connection between those statements. And that's when you get those statements that are kind of worthless. They add nothing to the, to the value of the statement. They add nothing to the understanding of the head teacher, the principal, whoever's reading it. And I think people really need to reflect on that. And one way, if you don't want to come to me, that's absolutely fine. But then ask friends or family to read through it and say, okay, how would you summarize this? What would your takeaways be? And if they can't, they go, oh, well, you're good at like planning lessons, and I know you're really passionate about SEN, but those are only 2 points, and that's only 2 small parts of our whole role as a teacher. You know, you need to think about lesson planning, assessments, you need to mention safeguarding, you need to mention behavior, you need to mention things that, you know, might make you stand out from the crowd in terms of maybe an experience you did, a club you did, I don't know, an additional piece of CPD that actually you'd like to implement in your classroom, etc. There needs to be value, and you need to know why you are writing that. Every single thing needs to have a purpose. And so when we get to the conclusion, a lot of people miss that off. That's another common mistake I see. They just don't write a conclusion. They kind of finish on the last paragraph, there's a full stop, and then that's it. And I'm like, okay, I write this nearly in every single personal statement. If you had, you know, let's say you were in a school and you put a job out and you had 90, 100 people apply. If you didn't have the time, we don't want to think about this, but they might just read your introduction and your conclusion. If you don't say anything about yourself in the introduction, you do it very general about teachers, like teaching is one of the most kind of thing. They don't know anything about you. If they read your conclusion and there are no takeaways from that, there's no summary, they don't know what you've written and they won't bother to go through it all. And actually, the introduction is your first hook. It's your first impression, and your conclusion is the last thing that they're going to take away. So if they don't bother reading it all, they know that X, Y, Z are your key points. Then you want to work there because A and B reason. And finally, in a few years' time, you'd love to be a subject lead or head of department because you're really passionate about this and you hope that this school is the one that it's going to be at. Then you know that both of those have purpose. And even if they don't read anything else, you know that your purpose, your value has come across, even if it's just in those 2 paragraphs. So I think biggest thing is lack of direction, lack of purpose, and no conclusion. Those are 3 huge mistakes that I see very often. And I will be very honest, I forgot the rest of your question.
That's fine. That was amazing. Thank you. I love your advice to get people to read your personal statement. It isn't something that I did because I was so embarrassed about my ability to write. I never got people to read it. Website was only going to make me less likely to be successful. It's great that you've shared that because I do feel like that's something that I should have done and have more confidence in myself. My other question was, one piece of advice you give for someone that's applying for a job?
So apart from obviously doing all the things that are common mistakes I see, a piece of advice I would give people is to try, and even if you don't feel confident, let's say you've had loads of rejection, you know, you've had confidence knock from training, maybe you're on a cause for concern in your training, anything that may have, you know, had a knock on your confidence, fake it in your personal statement that you feel confident, because those people that send me a statement, I can tell, even if they have not said a word to me, whether they feel confident or not, because any little like nugget of doubt shows in that personal statement. You often see things like, I believe I am a good teacher. Oh my gosh, you're either a good teacher or you're not. But you're not going to tell them you're a bad teacher. Tell them you are a good teacher and believe it. And I think the moment you start with imposter syndrome or those limiting beliefs or those negative thoughts of, I don't think I'm going to get a job because I've just come out of a cause for concern and I really don't think I'm going to get this one. This one's an amazing school. Guess what? You probably won't, because all of that doubt comes in, even in the introduction. It's your first impression to the school. And actually you just think, I have Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 experience, even though, you know your Key Stage 2 experience was 2 weeks. And then actually you think, oh, I'm not qualified for Key Stage 2. I'll delete that. Because, you know, deleting, giving phrases like, I believe, I feel, I think, all of those add to doubt. And I think you just need to believe in yourself. Instead of saying things like, let's think of an example. I observed my mentor and used some of the techniques that they used in my lesson and it worked really well. Let's say, and it worked really well is their impact statement. You don't want to talk about your mentor. You don't want to talk about anyone else. If you're talking about collaborative setting, then you want to make it seem that it was equal weighting. You don't want to seem like you were that person sat on a chair listening in. For that mentor example, okay, you're going to say, having observed my mentor, I adapted and implemented the techniques that were used in my lesson to meet the needs of X child or my group. And I realized that actually some things weren't working, so I adapted it this way. All these powerful verbs: adapted, initiated, what else? The new, obviously you've got the ones like planned, which are just part of our role, assessed. But you want everything to sound like a big deal. You want to make everything sound like you're proud of it. Because, if you are against people with loads of experience, the most frustrating thing is being told, sorry, somebody else had more experience. And like, I know that. But you don't want that to be an excuse. You want them to be like, okay, they've only had a year. But oh my gosh, they've, done this group. They've made this intervention. They're clearly very creative when it comes to their lesson planning. They are completely in sync with our school values, because I can see from their examples, they have been, linked with whatever vision from the school. I want to hear from them. I want to interview them, because this person has 5 years extra experience, but I just have a good feeling about them, that they're positive and they know what they're doing. And I think that's my piece of advice. If you do identify as, lacking in confidence, not believing in yourself, imposter syndrome, work on that first. Go through that journey into proactively combating that before you put any of your life experience on paper, because it shows, and that makes it so much harder for them to edit it. Because, like you said, you didn't want to read over your personal statement because you weren't proud of the writing. You didn't like how you wrote. Well, imagine if you've got that feeling mixed with not believing in yourself anyway. It just meshes into, I really want the job, but I don't think you should employ me, to be honest. That's how it feels when you read it. And if I can identify that as never having been a head teacher, I've never worked in recruitment, then those experienced people at the top of their game, at the top of the school, will definitely identify that. So avoid common errors, believe in yourself, write with power and purpose. And that's how you start to form your personal statement, as well as then the obvious, use the personal specification, use, the teacher standards to help you. All of those things, we know those, but it's the things that build the foundation of the effectiveness of your personal statement that people forget, don't know about, or lack. And just believe in yourself, because we all have those doubts. We all think, oh my gosh, am I good enough to talk on a podcast? Are people going to take me seriously? But sometimes you just have to go for it and believe in yourself, believe in your ability to start a podcast, to be a guest on it, believe in your ability to actually go for that job, because I've done my training, I've qualified, I am worth it, I do know the teacher standards, I can do this, rather than being like, oh, well, what if a previous guest on this podcast has more education than me, or knows what they're talking better, or, one of the candidates in the job, might have 10 years experience. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Don't think about that. Just think about the positive ifs. Believe in yourself. But it's easier said than done, I know. So it's a journey that people need to start on the moment they sense that they're having those kind of negative thoughts and disbeliefs.
Thank you so much. You're so inspiring to listen to all day. So thank you. Miss Bard, I will pass over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miss Paris. Honestly, that was exactly what Miss Dimon said. Genuinely inspiring and so enjoyable to listen to. I feel very motivated now. Just in general. And I think some really key things that you said there, you mentioned about collaboration and just changing the way you word things and showing that you've got that confidence. Absolutely, you said about support plans. And obviously in my role, as a induction tutor and working within teaching and learning teams, sometimes I have to have those difficult conversations with teachers and I have to put them onto support plans and etc., etc. But the whole time I'm always talking about, no, have the confidence that you've improved on this, you've done this. And when people are applying for jobs after coming out of a support plan, how amazing, you came out of the support plan, you came out of the other side. So it's absolutely incredible. And I think a really key thing there, actually, fake it until you make it. Because if you show that you have got the confidence, even if deep down you don't, if you show, actually, I'm really confident in this, I can do this, I have done this, I improved in this area, even though it once was a weakness. I did this to make sure that I can now do it really successfully. Actually, when you get into that job, after you've successfully written your personal statement, successfully done the interview, successfully done the lesson plan because you faked it, actually, you faked it, but then you did it and you made it because you're amazing and you're strong. So really inspiring. Thank you so much. So lastly, we like to end our podcasts on a research bite. So please, could you share your research bite to our listeners?
Yes, so I know that most of your listeners are obviously teachers, so I wanted to share a piece of research that I use constantly within the classroom, and that is kind of modelling metacognitively. So the power of doing everything metacognitively is you're almost teaching them indirectly how to think, how to process a question. I'm sure, for, I don't know, let's say something like physics, you could easily just say to them, okay, this is how we do the formula, this is how you calculate it, off you go, try it. But instead, if you model, okay, so I see this formula, I don't know where I'm going to go with it. Okay, I know this information. Let me put that into the equation. Okay, and then I know this part, and you take them through that stage. It makes them think, and then when they go to do that question themselves, even if they don't know what to do, they're like, okay, well, Miss first did this step, and then she looked at the question, she took these numbers and put it into the formula. You know what I'm kind of going for. It helps them be a lot more independent and confident in themselves. And the problem is when you just teach them things, they often doze off. And then that's when you get the, I don't know what to do, or what are we doing again? Which is the most frustrating question. I don't know if you find this as well. But yeah, so I think teaching metacognitively is huge. And I try and do this both in my coaching course, Petite Primary, but also in the classroom. And it's even recommended by the, I hope I get this right, Education Empowerment Foundation?
Endowment, very close. Education Endowment, EEF.
Yeah, you remember it's EEF, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, they recommend it as well. And I think it just has such a huge impact. And whether you're doing it in kind of year 1 or year 6, obviously in secondary it works as well, I think it's absolutely huge. And they can feel more independent, they can figure out their problem. And yeah, I would just recommend it to everyone. And also when you use the word metacognitively, whether it's writing it in a lesson plan or when you're talking about your reflection, it sounds like you know your stuff as well. So, that's just a little additional benefit to it. But I would definitely recommend people try that or research it if they haven't already heard of it. And that's my research bite.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that was your research, but I think the research there is very evident and it's very topical in schools at the moment. I know there's a lot of research, like you said, on EEF, which is the Education Endowment Foundation. There's some research from Sweller, and there is some research in Tom Sherrington's books as well. So he's got books that go over Rosenshine's principles and talks about metacognitive loads. So absolutely brilliant research by there. Thank you. So one last thank you to Miss for all of her amazing information today. Thank you to our listeners for joining the conversation. We hope you find today helpful. The last thing then, Miss Paris, where can all of our listeners find your details and find your website and find your Instagram?
So my Instagram is at the Petite Primary. From there, if that's the only thing you remember, you can also find my link. And my YouTube is just Petite Primary. It should come up. But yes, if anyone has any questions about anything that I mentioned today, if they generally have any questions about applying for jobs, how to improve on their statements, then just reach out. I'm a very open person, open book, and as you can see, I'm very honest about my experiences. So if anyone ever feels in the same boat, more than welcome to just ping me a message and I will reply. But thank you again for having me. It's been amazing. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Last goodbye to our listeners, and we'll try and put all the links into our show notes. Thank you.